Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm excited about today. I am bringing a friend on, Sheridon Taylor. He was in it was before the 6 month deep dive. It was before the rewire. It was after the empowerment strategist. He did a 3 month beta, and some of the things that happened in that group with you guys, and especially with you, I still talk about today because I think there was some magic that happened, and I wanted to do a show on shadow work. And as I was thinking about shadow work, and then we were talking about having you on the show, I'm like, let's just combine the two because I think it's a really important conversation to have, especially with men and women, but especially with men, about what happens in the kind of work that I'm doing and that you're doing and that you did, and when do we look at the negative, and when are we analyzing, and when are we feeling, and when are we like, what's the timing of all of this, and where do you get to the place, especially as a man, to say, okay, I'm ready for this? Because as a lot of people know, I have mostly women. There are men that listen to this podcast, but I wanted to bring you on to represent that you've done this work with me, and or some of it anyway, and see where you are now, and just catch up with you. So, welcome to the show, Sheridon.
It's fabulous to see you, JJ.
It is
Um,
so nice to see you.
and thank you for having me on. I think about what life was like when we first met, probably close to 3 years ago, almost to the month, and what it's like now, and it's so different. I remember, I guess it was the start of my awakening. I guess through the work I did with you, I just started to think differently. I was at the end of my rope, I guess, in terms of options. I had sobered up. I was a good guy. I was accountable and responsible, but there's just something missing. Um, and yeah, I'm a man in a man's world. And even though I think I learned a fair bit around emotions, and I think my vocabulary was pretty good for a man after being sober and in the program for 7 years. I was nowhere. I realize now I hadn't even scratched the surface, and likely had just replaced something with another form of keeping busy with the program work. But good to see you, JJ. It's there's a lot kind of bubbling out, as you can tell, and I thought I think I had worked with you for a couple of 3 months, and I had so many tears streaming down my face so many times, which was a first for me, and I still have it in my notes in my phone and my book, and it's "I am man, see me cry."
Hmm.
And that statement in itself is such a paradox in terms of, I guess, the role, everything that's expected, right? So the shadow work, yeah, I mean, the work we did, it was effective, and really, I guess, kind of started to rewire the way I think, rewire my beliefs, big time.
Yeah. Uh, you know, so I've had a few men on here that I've worked with recently. Patrick, I think you met Patrick back at he had done actually he moved on to do a 6 month deep dive after your 3 months, and then ended up also doing the mastermind and starting to coach other men because you guys are needed, and you both have a similar history of being in recovery, and then finding a place. Now, yours was different in terms of you were, and why don't you tell that story a little bit about how you found me in the first place and what was going through, like what was in your life that got you to make the call, got you to be interested in listening to a podcast?
Yeah. Well, it was a bit of a surprising. Well, it wasn't surprising, paradoxically, but anyway, all things, I guess, from the outside looking pretty good. Keeping it together, good career, a little family, 7 years sober, everything really kind of looking good in terms of maybe pulling it off, right? Actually having a family and a wife that I would go get old with, and I was there. And then a conversation that my wife was not willing to do this anymore, and that was it. It was literally it. It was a 1 hour discussion, and that was over. So I found myself spinning and kind of reaching out and anywhere I could for help, and I connected with one of your students, JJ, and an empowerment strategist, I believe, was the handle, and we had a conversation, and there was something that she said, JJ, that really landed. I've always believed, in my ability and my powers to create my um, my reality, and that my thoughts carry a lot of weight in terms of my life and what's happening in it, and I like that. But she said if you do believe that in your ability to manifest, then you have to also believe that you've manifested your separation, and that just landed fully and squarely. And started it just cracked the door open, because I was at a point, JJ, where I wasn't interested in pointing fingers. There was no fingers to point, and yet at the pit of my existence there was still this question and this hole and this, yeah, just this uncertainty, right? Lost, after doing all the work. I think there's a point, JJ, where you're doing all those things out there, and then you get to what happened, and it's scary, because what are the options but that full ownership, and that comment around the manifestation of my separation is kind of what landed and started me down the trail of doing work and listening to your podcasts, and then engaging. But it was really quick how we
Well,
connected.
you had, yeah, well, when, you know, Sheridan has offered his story for my book, which, by the way, as of the recording of this, which was literally the day before it's published, I have now sent off that manuscript to the agent. It's now out of my hands. The proposal is in her lap. The manuscript is in route to her, and you had offered to put your story in there, and I included it for this first draft of the manuscript. And and looking back at the pivotal moment, and I call it embracing the catalyst. It's actually, I think, my second chapter or my first chapter of the book, because it's the catalyst in our lives that make us. It's the pain, right? We're either pushed by pain or pulled by passion, and either is a bubbling up of passion that makes the body go, I have to take action, or we're pushed by pain, and that's either physical pain or spiritual pain or emotional pain in this case. And definitely my divorce did that for me. I mean, I wouldn't know anything that I know right now without that, without trying to save my marriage for so long and really doing the work. And we say the work, and you said like doing all the work, because you're looking at recovery, you're looking at AA, you're looking at, and that being work, and it is work. And for someone who's just starting out, it seems like that's a lot of work. But what I think all the recovery programs miserably fail at is what happens after you are successfully not choosing the substance or the behavior that got you there in the first place. Do we actually love ourselves? I mean, that's how Patrick got here, was after that, the event that you were at, Awaken Your Dream Life. At the end of it, in the circle, he said, I realized this weekend that I don't love myself. And he'd been, in recovery for 20 some years. So it's like, okay, well, this is the missing link here. You can't just be sober or clean or restricting yourself from whatever, and then not love yourself or be happy, because the reason why you did it in the first place is because you weren't happy. Right? To me, it just doesn't make any sense. But I get it, because you're told, like, and in the majority of, I think, men out there, and even a lot of women think that, oh, I got to do the program. The program is the work. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of other work too. But no one tells you that when you go in, because the first step is to get you into a place where you feel comfortable, you're with like-minded people struggling with the same thing, and then you overcome and you get to the healthier place of not using whatever you're using. But again, we really haven't dug into the why of it. And so that's what we did. And I think you had listened to the victim mentality podcast a couple of times and sort of felt what I'm going to translate is empowered, like hopeful. You felt hopeful because you decided to like listen and listen and listen and listen. You wanted more and more and more, which is why then we barely had one conversation and you jumped into this 3 month program because you were like, help, I need help.
Yes. Well, and it is. It's a graduation from, I think, a very, basic set of tools that you pick up in AA or in a treatment center. But yeah, there's no solutions in behind those tools other than, they might get you clean or sober, but yes.
So you joined this 3 month program. And so the 3 month program was, in my mind, I had just done 2 years of my empowerment strategist certification program. And you met Libby. And Libby was in the first year of that empowerment strategist certification, which I did it with this idea that, because especially like Libby was one of the most seasoned trainers with me because she'd already been working in recovery. She'd already been doing those programs. And so she kind of already was coaching. And I treated all of them like coaches, even though a lot of them weren't actually coaching. And so I just shared my tools with them. And Libby definitely, like me, had a very profound effect with some of the tools that I had used without any other coaching or guidance. And so that year, I decided after the end of that year, I thought, well, there's this magic that happens with these groups. And I think I need to do it again. So, okay, next year I'm doing the empowerment strategist again. Now, that group, they came in. I had one person, she was 27. Do you remember Scout? So, Scout had come in. She was 27, 4 kids, hairdresser, has her own business. And I said to her, do you want to be a trainer? Like, why are you taking the empowerment strategy? And I said, you're so busy. And she goes, no, I want to do the work. And I said, oh, okay. So then that group did the work. I treated them as clients, on as trainers, and we did a deep dive on all of those things. And again, this is a 6 month program. I'm always nervous at the beginning, not anymore. I've done this enough that it always works out. But I'm always like, okay, these different personalities, are they going to get along? Like what's going to happen here? And so the magic again sort of happened again, and I'm like, man, like why aren't more people, well, it was a certification. Like how do I do this for people that aren't necessarily wanting to become certified and be one of my trainers? Well, let's do a 3 month program. And then so I thought, well, let me just cut it in half and do this 3 month program, which is what you were in. And at the end of your program, even though there were changes with all of you on some level, it was like feeding from a fire hose, like because it was so much work in such a little bit of time. It was nowhere near what I'm doing now with the rewire. I mean, it's some of the same content, but it wasn't enough time for me to guarantee that every single person in the group, in fact, Maureen is going to do the rewire next year because she knows it's different than what you guys did. Like it's much more comprehensive than what you guys did. But again, what you did, and I think your story, one of the my favorite stories about your story. Let's talk about your dad. Let's talk about the ahas maybe that you might have had, or the ideas you had coming into working with me, maybe through therapy or through the 12-step program, about your relationship with your dad. Can we talk about that a little bit?
For sure. I think, you had challenged me, and of course, through all my work and, and getting sober and staying sober and living sober, like, I had to let go of a lot of the past. I had to let go of my angers and resentments to others, and myself, anger at others, and all of those things. And I had done this comprehensively, right? It's one of the steps, pages and pages of anger and resentments that I released, and I was good to release them, and I was certain that I had let those things go and forgiven my father for not necessarily being there, and I could see his perspective and the time. He did what he had to do, and I thought I was good with all those things. And then I think we got into maybe that shadow work. But
Well,
but you challenged me, JJ. You said, I want you to take this next week or two, but I want you to look at your father through a compassionate lens. And I want you to think back through all of those years and find examples of that could have been love. Because I think I had told you he would walk by me at times and grab my arm. I was 12 or 10 and give it a little shake and comment about those sparrow ankles. He would call my arms sparrow ankles. So I would eat and eat and eat and work out and work out and work out. But that was how he showed his love. But for be it 45 years, I carried that story around as a negative story. So as soon as I started to do that, JJ, man, it was one after another. All those things that he had done just started to bubble to the top. And he came from a horrible place and a horrible childhood and a nightmare of a family, and did not have tools and did the best he could, and all of those things that I looked at and ridiculed him. I look at my Mago work now, and it makes me cry for the thoughts that I carried for half of my life that was just a wrong story.
Well, okay, so that's what I'm talking about. You at the beginning of the program, probably like 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, maybe even a month in. You also kept a therapist at the same time, and you had said in the Marco group, you had two therapists. Okay, so you had the therapist, and you came back from your therapy session, and I was a little perplexed because I'm always perplexed when like, just give me some time, give me some time. But you're like, oh, I'm working with 10 other people. I'm like, hold on, can we focus for a second? You're like, oh, I just came from my therapist to deal with my anger from my dad. And I was like, okay, time out. And this is all on a Marco. And I said, tell me a little bit about this anger that you have with your dad. And you said, my dad was never there for me. He was always traveling. I wasn't important to him. And, and all of this. And I said, okay, we haven't gotten there yet in this program, but let me skip ahead right now and go through a couple different things for you to think about. And I call them frameworks, whether that's accurate or not. Technically, I don't care. But, I have many different frameworks that I use. And one of them is love languages. So we looked at love language. I said, what was your dad's love language? And then I also went back and asked, at that point, we might have just started the core wound work. And I said, what was your dad's core wounds? Right? We looked at his core wounds. We looked at his love language. We looked at your love language. And we came up with a very different story. One that I even, for one point, want to do like a TED talk and use your story as an example of how you can change the past. People will say, oh, you can't change the past. I'm like, oh, bullshit. Yes, you can. You can't change what happened, but you sure as shit can change exactly what you think about it and how you feel about it. Because I remember very specifically after you taking in that and thinking about it and sitting with it, that you came back and said, holy crap, I now can see how my father loved me. Because your story was, my father didn't love me. My father didn't love me. My father didn't love me. He didn't love me because he was never around, because your love language is quality time. And his was not. His was acts of service, right? Okay. So now you're feeling loved feelings where you were feeling anger and hurt. And all of a sudden it shifted and you went and you said to me, JJ, is this how easy this can be? And I was like, I said, yeah, it depends on the situation. But yeah, when you get it, you get it. Like when you turn around and look and it reinterpret from a different point of view with new tools, with new information. That's my issue with therapy in general, or people that are doing, someone said this week, well, I come from the school of people, the answers are already inside of you. I'm like, no, they're not, because you don't even know the information. Yes, do you resonate? Do you know what's right for you? But how can you make a decision? You couldn't find a different answer. You were searching for years to make sense of, why did my father love me? He didn't love me. He didn't love me. He was never around. That is what you told yourself because that's all you knew. But add in a new bit of information, love language. His is acts of service. Yours is quality time. Oh, huh. Well, that changes everything. Now I can, and his core wounds, and now I can see my father did really love me in the way that he knew how. And he isn't like me. He isn't a touchy-feely guy. He isn't quality time. And his father didn't love him the way that he wanted to be loved. And so, you exemplified how quickly change and healing can happen by understanding a new concept and therefore changing the way we interpret our past or interpret our even our now, right? Interpret everything. It's a new lens that you were looking out at.
And, from the ages of whatever I was born till I was 14, whatever those stories I had in my mind, they weren't accurate. They were not truthful in terms of what would have been going on in everybody's lives and situation, not even close. So because, no one could tell me what was going on, I made these stories up and I carried them with me for half of my life.
And because of the stories led to the abuse and the violent and the drinking and the anger and the right?
All of it,
Right.
right? Unloved, unvaluable, unseen, right?
Right. Right.
And The minute you're right. I mean, you talk about collapsing time and space. It was unbelievable. It's just like everything fell off, and we did that guided meditation, and I was with him. It was forgiven, It's that quick. Oh,
Well, you were ready. And you said that in
ready.
the beginning. You were, this is what I'm trying to figure out, Sheridan. I'm trying to figure out with the men, and again, I've had a few, but like, what does it take? There's nothing I don't know that I can say or do. It's not really about my words, it's about your life experience. Your life experience with a threat of divorce, or I'm getting divorced, open and broke open you to a little bit more of a, okay, I'm desperate. I need to learn something. I need to figure this out. And now I don't know where to go. And I feel I'm looking for hope. Oh, there's something I don't know. Great, I want to learn that. And you took, and so now it's like, how do I get men in here before we hit that point? Like,
Oh,
how?
JJ, the empowerment piece stuck with me. Be a victim or be empowered. And when I listened to those podcasts over and over and over and over again, I was like, I am never going to, because I see where I slot in. I am the rescuer all day long and around and around and around and around. I mean, that was like so uh, eye-opening for me, and I didn't want to be a victim anymore. I wanted to go down this empowered path, and that was a little bit of enlightenment. I was interested in that, but the empowered piece, and you know, I don't know that saying. It was if something outside of me is responsible for my happiness or my lack of happiness, then I'm in victim mode. And I repeat that to myself probably once a week to keep myself in check. But because I will not be in victim mode anymore. And the work we did on the feelings and needs, how beautiful is that? And I always find at the bottom is that underlying little addiction that just wants to carry on and hang on, that control piece, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But beautiful work. And I'm able to go through life and every day empowered, knowing that everything is because of my thoughts, because of my choices, and that nothing outside of me is responsible for my happiness today or my lack of happiness. What a beautiful place to be. It's
definitely.
unbelievable. Thank you, JJ.
You're welcome,
The
Sheridan.
other one that sticks with me is, and I think this is yours, and I should tattoo it on me. when I respond, when I respond differently emotionally to the same
Situation. Yeah, that's my quote
situation,
is
I am
healing
healed.
is when you're different in the same situation.
Yes. And there's just examples of that all around me every day, professionally, family, those things that I used to have a negative emotional response to, I no longer do. And again, I think all centers back to, that work we did, those things I had not, those emotions I hadn't processed yet in terms of my dad. Because once I rewrote the story and I corrected it, those feelings disappeared of being unworthy, unlovable. Like the last 3 years of my life, I've been on fire. Like
Tell
I'm a
us,
new
tell
man.
me.
It's amazing. My career is accelerated. I have, I could, whatever I want. It's amazing. I'm happy. I'm debt free. I mean, it financially in the relationship world is amazing. I'm a very happy man. I have no stress. I have no worries. It's all in the universe's hands. And I'm empowered. It's a beautiful thing. And, when I think of all the men out there, it's just, you know, take ownership. All of it. Not some of it, all of it. You can't sit there and say, I only created and, you know, brought in the good shit in my life. No, you brought in the bad stuff too. Just own it. Right. When I thought about those things and that aspect, yes, black and white. If I get honest with myself, yes, I can see how I manifested that separation because it was not a match. And I knew that 6 months in. There's the honesty.
Right.
There was a fundamental mismatch at a value level, and I knew that. And so there we go. So there is no blame. Nothing wrong happened. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. And I learned that from you.
Well, thanks. I'm glad that it sticks. I want to go over the shadow work piece, and I want to talk to you about it as uh, like to just discuss because I've had people in the community who talk about, well, on one side, I've got the people that say, "Oh, I love shadow work," and there are people who I know for sure can't even sit in their skin when they're uncomfortable. So I'm like, yeah, I don't think you know what shadow work is. Like, I think, and then I had someone else who had said, well, I'm interested in shadow work, and I was like, okay, we need to have a definition of shadow work. Now I know that there is no single official definition of shadow work, but it is a term that's rooted in psychology and widely used in spiritual, therapeutic, and self-help. And so I've kind of put together a little bit with the help of ChatGPT, of course, a widely accepted and grounded definition that reflects both its psychological origins and modern usage. So here's the definition: shadow work. Shadow work is the process of, and then we're going to talk about it after I read these paragraphs to you. I'm going to take it one by one. Shadow work is the process of exploring and integrating the unconscious parts of yourself, thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and patterns that you've repressed, denied, or disowned, often because they were deemed unacceptable by your family, society, or your own belief system. Okay, so when I say that, what comes up for you when I say that?
Um, the power of our unconscious mind and the fact that it's never ceases to operate. When I think about the emotions and the thoughts that I would run and carry in my subconscious mind, probably different than what I would hope to carry in my conscious thinking. And I knew that if I was to move past and move on in my conscious thinking, how do we address all the subconscious thoughts? All those stories that just spin and spin and spin day and night. My subconscious mind is telling me lies. And I think about my conscious mind being a slave to that subconscious mind, and how do we get into subconscious thoughts?
Well, don't you think we did with the feelings and needs as well as the core wound work? Because how many of
Yeah,
us identify it's not a conscious thought that we carry that I was abandoned or that I've been devalued or that I'm not good. Like we don't carry that in our conscious mind. It's a feeling, it's a belief, it's in our cells. It's something that happens literally when we are born. We have our brain waves aren't conscious yet until we're 7. All these core wounds happen before we're 7. They are plugged right into your subconscious. So what we're doing is we're doing a deeper dive to see what those unconscious beliefs are. That's what the whole core wound work is. It's because you don't come up against a decision in your day and say, well, let's see, based on my core wound. I'm like, we don't have those conversations, right? Or if you're getting triggered, you don't immediately, now, unless you've learned it, when you start to learn it, you go, huh, what was that about? You become the observer and you say, what wound got triggered? But before you even know there is a wound, you're just reacting. Not you, but everybody, right? So to me, like when I read this definition, I'm like, yeah, well, this is exactly what we're doing in the rewire. It's exactly what you did in the 3 months that we were there. I mean, I take it deeper now and we do different things with it, but it's literally it's like exploring and integrating the unconscious parts of you. But the tools that we use are defining and pulling out the specifics about what is it that I believe. I don't even would you agree that you learned about beliefs you had that you didn't know you had?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah,
I feel very strongly in saying most people who don't know, who don't do any of this core wound work, do not know what they believe, do not have, like, could not articulate what they believe about themselves until you start to ask the questions, look at the behaviors, look at how your body responds, look at your patterns and your habits from your entire life. Then we can extract. And by the way, for anyone who's listening to this or watching this process happens very quickly. Like we're not like you don't spend years or days or months. You like literally do an exercise. It takes a couple of hours. And then from there, we can extract the wounds and the stories and the beliefs very quickly because otherwise I don't think people know what they believe. I know I keep learning that I must, oh well, you attract what you believe. So if you just look at what you're attracting, then it can tell you what you believe. But most people aren't ready to say, oh, I think I believe that I'm not good enough. How many people without doing any work can actually own that and say that? Not a
Well,
lot of people.
when
So,
when I yeah, when I look at the Imago work we did, right, and you want to talk about how profound a belief can change, 180-degree flip. When I look at the beliefs I had and the feelings that I tied to those beliefs with my dad, they flipped 180 degrees. I look at the feelings that I felt and my frustrations there. Um, that's like a different person. It's hard for me to actually go back and think that way because I believe so differently now in the man that he was
right.
and all the things that he did. Like,
So looking at the pain, see, to me, shadow work is also looking at the pain parts, looking at the and being able to sit in the pain, and also some of the uncomfortable truths about the anger that we have, or the things that we don't like, or the ways that we feel disempowered, or that someone, being in a blame. There have been times in these programs that I've said to somebody, I don't know who it was, actually, it might have been it was the first empowerment strategist group that Libby was in. I had one of my clients here. We were doing the retreat and we were tapping. And I said, I want you to say the most victimy, blamey, like I want you to be really honest about how you feel. That's shadow work, right? Because when we're being honest with in that part of ourselves that feels disempowered, that feels it's not conscious, it's not looking at the big picture, we're in that part of the brain that's in survival mode, and we want to yell and scream and tear people apart. That's like getting in touch with that power. I remember saying to you, because I knew you had pain and I knew you could kind of go like, the beauty to me was, and I said this to someone else today too, who hasn't been feeling, and she finally said, "Well, I'm sad," and she's like, "And I'm uncomfortable." I'm like, "Good, welcome to the human race. Like you're feeling sad, but know that when you start to open that heart up, and because as much pain as you've had." You can swing to have as much joy. And I said that to you because you had had years and years and years of so much pain and darkness. And I said, and I did not think that was bad at all. I'm like, excellent. You know what? That's great. You have explored that part of yourself. And now the pendulum is going to swing in the opposite direction because now you're going to have tools to work through that. It was never about a over positivity denial of any of those negative feelings. It was a full embrace of those negative feelings. It's the human part of ourselves. It's to allow that energy out. And then what do we do about it? And then how do we shift into that? Because I know for you, you were like the parts of you that your history, your colorful history of pain and during use, right? I remember you talking about that and I thought, okay, cool. Like do that. Like you've had that experience and it also means you can have the opposite experience in the same extreme. Extreme joy, happiness, feeling like amazing and love all over the place, which by the end of the program with your dad, you did. And it sounds like you do now too.
amazing.
So the shadow work, everyone, and I think the reason why I want to talk about this with Sheridan is because of his past. And I don't know if there's anything you want to speak to that because they're hearing you now kind of in a place of like everything is awesome and amazing. But what about the darker places?
Well, I think if you got to be willing to get honest. Like until I'm willing to get brutally honest with myself, nothing's going to change. I am not going to be able to grow or anyway, I think, for me, and I think it was Libby's comment around the manifestation. Again, it was the comment that kind of cracked open that side of manifestation. And so yeah, I guess the honesty, you have to be brutally honest, right? And so for me, an example of that shadow work is really like stop pretending that what happened was bad, that they were wrong, that they did something like, I have to get so honest to say is that I was part of that. I created that. But that opens up, that opens me up and says, I didn't know. I was scared. Well, I made decisions because I was scared. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. And so there's two things I think that are the most difficult words for me. And maybe it's because I'm a man, so maybe other men can relate. Two words that really stuck coming out of me: help and the other one is I don't know.
Mm.
And so you sit there, right? Bottled right up, trying everything. But the reality is that when you say, hey, I created this, I created this mess again. And there's a pattern here. I see it. Effect of it. Creating messes, right? So the shadow work will open up all those scary places that I've never been, right? The
Yeah.
fact that I don't know what I'm doing, the fact that I'm scared as hell, the fact that I was in love. I think I was really in love. Those kinds of things that I've never said that to a human being. A man doesn't say those words. I'm scared. I don't know what to do, right? I'm terrified. I make decisions because I'm scared. You don't say that to anybody. I'll say that
Well,
to you.
do you remember, I think the other pivotal example that I feel you represented, our work together represented, was, and this is another piece of that shadow work. I'm going to continue reading this and I'm going to bring up this example that I remember from you. So, the purpose of shadow work is to become more whole and authentic by accepting all parts of yourself, to reduce self sabotaging behaviors and emotional triggers, which, hello, we're doing in the core wound work, to heal trauma, uncover core wounds, and build emotional resilience, and to improve relationships, self worth, and personal empowerment. Okay, one more thing. In practice, shadow work might involve identifying your triggers and the stories behind them. Check, we do that. Journaling or guided inner dialogue with disowned parts of yourself. So we do that now. I do an inner child work exercise that I don't know that we ever did it, but anyway, inner child work is part of some of the things that we're doing in the Rewire. So we can check that off. Working with a therapist or coach to help you explore repressed feelings or behaviors. Check. Recognizing projection when you see in others what you haven't acknowledged in yourself. Check, we do that. And reparenting or inner child healing practices. So the thing that I think is most pivotal about some of the what I'll call what we did shadow work with you, and some people can't access the darker parts of them. They try to be positive and up, they don't won't admit that they are angry. They won't admit that they're sad. They won't admit that they have shame. They won't admit. That's shadow work, everybody. That is literally uncovering those parts of yourself and then accepting them and loving them and then figuring out how to help that part of you. In fact, at Awaken Your Dream Life, we did that with the characters. And we do that now in the Rewire also, where we're looking at character 2, which would represent the shadow work, the one that's afraid, the one that doesn't want to grow because they're trying to protect you and they don't mean to keep you back, but they are because that part of you is afraid, constantly afraid of whatever being, overtaken in a man's world. Like, oh, if I say I'm scared, it means I'm weak. And if I'm weak and then someone's going to kill me, like it'll be, our brain goes to like, the reason why you don't say that you're afraid is because it means I'm going to die. Now, are you really going to die? No, but that's what you're taught. That's what you're taught to protect this energy of that I have it together so that I'm not, someone doesn't attack me, someone doesn't kill me, someone doesn't obliterate me. But what we dealt with you, and I thought very successfully that you handled this very well, and I felt your transformation. And I think this is when the tears started to come, is that as a man, as a man's man that you are, tough and, get shit done and tall, in your presence, your anger, right? Like the anger piece. It is so easy for everyone to stay in anger, and women too. I have a client who just was there and I said, "Yeah, you are sad because you want to get mad. You want to make that guy wrong. You want to blame him because you want to go back up to anger because anger feels more empowering." It's not. Anger is the lid on the pot, boiling pot of fear or sadness. And so I know you had gotten triggered a couple times and like worked on, okay, hold on, let me breathe through this anger and ask the questions. I said, anytime you get angry, you ask yourself the question, what am I afraid of? Or what am I sad about? Because that is the truth about anger. And too many people, especially men, are wrecking relationships because we get into it, and women have it too, but I'm just thinking of certain other people that I know where I don't want to admit or feel that I'm sad or vulnerable. So instead, I'm going to be angry. I'm going to be angry, and that anger energy is going to create disconnection, and it will not promote anyone's healing. It now separates me when really what I long for is connection. Everyone is longing to be seen and heard and have connection, but our egos won't allow us we don't feel safe feeling fear or sadness. Do you remember working with the anger piece during the program?
Son JJ. There's such a stigma yet, um, and an expectation around what it is. And I grew up, as a man, and so never to be scared, right? Never to cry, seldom heard, right? Like it's such a contrast, but there's the bulk of society that lives under that bullshit.
Well, we're dealing with it right now, and I'm not going to mention the scenario we're dealing with in the world right now, because at any point in time, I'm sure we're dealing with a scenario in the world right now, right? But instead of people just being sad, people are getting angry. And so
Yeah.
now we're going to have more violence because everyone's angry when they just should admit they're sad and afraid. You're sad and afraid, but we're overcompensating with anger. So now there's going to be more violence and things going on because we're not being honest with that we're afraid and we're sad. And if we were to come to the table being sad and afraid and taking responsibility and learning something and learning how to communicate about needs and what is it that I need and how do I communicate that, then we could move forward and not recreate the scenario over and over and over again, which is what happens when you're in anger, right? Because we have a story. Everyone has a story. You mentioned that earlier, like these stories that you made up. Yeah, we all made them up. And I say that all the time to people. Like, yeah, your stories are probably wrong, everybody. Like, your stories about your childhood are wrong. Like, the things you believe about yourself are 100% wrong because you're only coming from your point of view, which is right for you, but wrong for you don't know what that person was thinking or going through. Like, start to like look at something differently so you can take a different point of view and have a more compassionate way to tell that story, which then might leave you off the hook and make you feel more whole again. Wouldn't that be better? So, yeah, the anger piece, it was really refreshing to work. I mean, both you and Patrick gave me the opportunity to work through some things that I wish I could have had the opportunity to work through with other people on anger.
And you hit, I think that's the most challenging word when it comes to a man and getting into the work and the hard shadow work, vulnerability. That is, probably the scariest word for a man to hear. Just go the other way. To
It's
get
probably
vulnerable as a man, that's a pretty scary word. But again, without that and without honesty,
there's no
nothing's going to
growth,
happen.
right?
Nothing's going to happen.
Have you been more vulnerable these last 3 years?
100%. And it's a beautiful thing, I carry these practices and things into my professional life and they're very effective there and into my family, my children. I remember JJ probably 6 months after we had met, I was no longer emotionally constipated, lots of tears quite often and tears with my young son. He was probably 7, 8, back in that period of time. And he made the comment, he said, Dad, I've never seen you cry so much. And I said, well, these are good tears. It's just because I'm scared in this case. Um, and I said to him that, before, this summer, Caden, I could count the times I've cried on one hand in my life. And his eyes were just wide open. He couldn't hardly believe that. Um, so much more connected. I didn't know what anger meant. You described it beautifully, right? So those are the two things that are really going on. And then in reality, most of the times I'm scared. And that's just been how I respond, right? Emotionally. But there's such a dramatic change in my life, rewiring those circuits and those responses. Those emotional responses were hardwired for 30, 40 years. And then just the change of the story was so profound. Yeah, it's like a new life, and it just continues. I do the work and then back out and study and refine a little bit. It's interesting to, gotta be working all the time, journaling every day, my gratitude page, my manifestation page, all of your tools, right? In and out as I continue to practice them, but super effective. It's been a remarkable. I could never have dreamt. Let's just put it that way, JJ, that my life would be what it is today when I think about when I met you. I could not have written, I could not have described it as beautifully as it is. In family, in love of myself, peace,
Mm.
happiness, lack of stress, lack of worry, and no more victim. I don't point fingers. When there's interactions, I don't view any of them as somebody having to be right or somebody having to be wrong. It's just an interaction. Yeah, it's been a blessing, JJ. You've been a miracle. So,
Thank you, Sheridan. Well, I wish more men. I mean, I'm part of the reason why I wanted to have you on the show and share your story. I have my live event coming up here in like a month, and I want to offer anyone who is in couple, because I don't know how else to get the men here, like, unless they're having a crisis like you have were having 3 years ago. I'm happy to do a 2-for-1 special. Ladies, bring your husbands or bring your sons or bring your brothers. I don't care. But get to the event so we can start this conversation, because, and this year it's called Unleashing Your Manifestation Power, which I did that because it's less scary. Like last year was Embodied Healing Intensive. Okay. The Embodied Healing Intensive. So that is a little like men are, I had women say, can I bring my husband this one? I said, no, no, unless they're working with me currently, this is not the first event they should come to. Okay. Because we're going to get deep and woo woo and very physical. So that's why I did this year was more, but how it's different than the other manifestation things I've done is we're looking at the survival states of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So your survival state was, probably still is, but doesn't get activated as much, is fight. That's number one, right? And I don't know what your second one would be. I mean, mine's fight also, but because I don't know, I don't see you as fawn. Maybe, and I don't see you as freeze. You probably are flee.
leave.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
just leave.
Right, right, right. I'm out of here. Right. So fight and flee. So we're looking at how those survival states block manifestation, right? Because a lot of people understand, oh, I got to feel good, I got to be in alignment. We know that already. Okay, so why am I not getting what I want, or why is it not moving? Well, because you're probably in a survival state, which is blocking the manifestation. So we're going to be working on that, and again, that comes down to the anger piece. The like, are we allowing ourselves to go deeper into the emotional experience of what's real for us, instead of just stopping at a place where we feel empowered, which is anger, and allowing that, which is where fight is. Fight comes from the fact that I feel threatened and my first response is going to be to fight. And but we have to work through, how do we soften these? How do we start to thaw some of them so that way we can allow in more joy? So anyone who's listening to this, if share this with your husband or your brother or your dad or your son, and see if they might be interested in having a life-changing experience, because it's time for you guys to do the work. It's time for the men, without you having to have your whole life crash in front of you. Although I understand that may be how you get to me, and for that I appreciate that, for you, Sheridan. But if you're at all ahead of the game and you're kind of thinking, oh well, I'm not happy, things aren't good, I find myself triggered a lot. Well, okay, you're on the path. Pretty much, something's gonna explode soon. So how about before that happens, get here so we can start to repattern some of these things. So, but I love that for you to share with the men. I mean, is there any other words of wisdom or advice that you would have for the men out there who maybe, I might scare them? One of my I did a couples retreat this year, and my client Mandy's, so Neil's like, yeah, JJ, she kind of scares me. But so he came with her. He's like, okay, I don't know, she's a little intense. But whether it be me or some other program, I'm writing the book. You can get the book in a year from now, hopefully, when it's sold to a publisher and it's the New York Times bestseller. But what else would you say to people, Sheridan, especially the men?
I think, for men and probably for everybody, you know, park that rigid thinking to the side, right? Just get curious. Get curious. There's more out there. I think the minute we think we've tried it all, we've heard it all, that rigid thinking sets in, you're done. There's going to be no further growth. So park that, um, get curious, open-minded, open-hearted, right? I think, and then just get honest. That's so key. And without that shadow work and staring down those demons and sitting in those emotions and loving them because they're good. They're part of my story, my crazy story, how beautiful it is. Every little part of it, the good, the bad, I love it. It's beautiful. It's me. I love it all. But you got to get honest, right? Get brutally honest. Otherwise, nothing's going to change. And you'll just go around and around and around and around. And maybe in 10 more years, you can decide to get honest, right? And then get out of that victim bullshit and start living. It's pretty, there's a lot of work to do, but man, you do a great job, JJ, of putting it all together, right? It's pretty straightforward. Once you open your mind up and you plug in and you do the work and you let go of all that bullshit and the stories and the lies. It's amazing. So get honest. I mean, if you want to change something, right, you gotta do something differently. You gotta see it in your day. Like get off your ass, get honest, change your life.
Definitely.
Wonderful. Yes.
What's next for you, sir?
Oh, I'm gonna working my way down to the U.S. I'm hoping to call California home
Yeah, we're
soon.
looking forward to it.
Yes. We'll connect and then we'll see what's in the future. But I love the opportunity to help and love the opportunity to share my story, certainly with men, because there is a ton of us that need help and need an example and just need to step out of that shell. I think I referred to it as just men, a bunch of walking dead out there. I see them every day, just like me, zombies, shells of men with layers and layers and layers of bullshit stacked on them, just trying to survive, and that's not living.
But they
It's
don't
not-
know what else to do. You're right, and they don't
they
know
don't.
where else to go.
They don't.
Yeah. Which is why either life has to crack open and you look, or
Yeah,
you have someone who knows you that says, "Hey, do this."
yeah. And traditional talk therapy ain't gonna get them anywhere.
No,
So they're
no.
screwed, stuck.
Yeah, yeah, all the therapists are gonna hate me. It's okay. It's okay. It's I don't
Um,
it's there are good therapists out there. I know there are. But just the
yes.
majority of the talk therapy issue is. And so I'll tell you because I don't think you know this. So Harville and Helen wrote the foreword to my book.
Nice.
They're the ones
Beautiful.
that created Imago therapy.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
I got the endorsement at the top of the page. So yeah, no,
Nice.
I've been endorsed by the powers that be. So I'm working with with one of their tools, and I've made that tool more comprehensive. And I walked him through the whole thing. We did a Zoom call so I could explain it because I've interviewed them so many times. And the last time had a book called How to Talk to Anyone About Anything. And so we're talking about it, and we're talking about like I forget how, and I said, can I add something in here why I think that is? And so then I said what I said, and he goes, you really understand this? And I said, oh, I've created an entire business around your core wound, your core wound exercise. And he was like, really? I want to know about that. So I was like, cool, can we get on a call? And I spent an hour with him, and I went through the whole thing, and he's like, I have never seen so much passion. And I was like, well, I'm excited because I just took this thing that you have that was life changing for me. And I noticed as I gave it to other people, it wasn't always life changing for them in the way that it was just presented. I needed to like work with it some more. So then I kind of made layers and I ended up making a map. So the map is now like the thing, and that's mine. That is cool. And yeah, but it's so fun to have somebody as ready as you were and as open as you are. And I want to also say you're a Pisces, right? Aren't you a Pisces with a Scorpio moon? Yeah, I know your chart. So so I just want to say Sheridan is also a very feeling person. Now, all men have feelings, but some of them are not going to show it at all, and some of them may not be in touch at all. You were in touch with yours; they were just mostly anger and sadness ones, right? And now that's changed, but you have access, you have faster access to some of those emotions versus some of those men are in their head and they're detached and they have anxiety and they're super anxious and they can't sit still, and some of them are so earth sign that they aren't paying attention to what their body is saying, so they're not as in tune. But there is hope for all of you. I will say it's not any all water signs that can do this because Patrick's a lot of air, and he totally took this on and did this and was super successful. So yeah, guys, ladies, please share this with every man that needs this. Please share the video. Go to my Rumble channel. Yes, it's on YouTube again, but YouTube and I don't get along. So go to my Rumble channel, Becoming Empowered, and share Sheridan so they can see this strapping, handsome, tall, manly man talk about his feelings so that he can heal and be happy versus not a zombie of repressed stuff and anger and sadness and incorrect stories about his dad's relationship to him. Now he can feel his love. So if you want that for the men around you, don't wait. Don't wait. Get them to the event. Get them some real help that's going to actually put them in a place where they have to be honest with themselves and look at themselves, but knowing that we're going for love. Like this is all about, like, yeah, the work is hard, but the reason why you do it is because how much better did you feel within the first month to literally change your entire history about looking at your dad and feeling pain? Now I look, I see love. Can it get any better than that? Like, of course you're going to want more of that. Like that's how you're like, this is JJ. Is this how easy it can be? I'm like, yep. Yep, this is how easy it can be. When you understand it differently, you feel differently. I'm going to leave you with Wayne Dyer's quote, one of my favorites, as the last thing here. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So, Sheridan, thank you so much. It was so great to see you. Thank you for inspiring everyone who's listened today. Continue to spread that inspiration everywhere you go. We need you. We need you telling every guy coming up and being, hey, I'm going to be the emotional police. You need to get some work. You need to love yourself, and I'm going to help you because we need it. We need it. We need it. We need it. So please continue working with everybody. Do you have any last things you want to say before I end today's episode?
Thanks for having me, JJ. And everybody, yes, just just start and you'll be amazed.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sheridan.
Thanks, JJ.